So good morning, everybody. We have with us today our speaker, George Wurtzel. George Wurtzel has worn many, many hats. He's been a woodworker. He is a woodworker. He's been a horse trainer. He's been a countertop installer. He's been a construction manager and many other things that I have not mentioned that he will talk to you about. One of the things that we want to start with is George, within the last couple years, did a national commercial for Subaru. And he is the main actor and voice in the commercial. So we're going to play that commercial for you. And then he can give you a little more detail about how it was filmed. And then he will move on to telling you about his very diverse life and careers throughout his life. All right, cue the commercial, please.
Here we go.
Does this map show the Peninsula Trail?
The shopkeeper shakes his head.
Peninsula Trail. You won't find that on a map.
Says an old man in the back.
I'll take you there.
Walking with a white cane. The couple, skeptical at first, invite him into the back seat of their Subaru.
You hungry? Me too. Take this left.
They drive up to a rustic seaside diner.
Now, don't eat just yet.
They inhale the aromas. Next stop, a cliff overlooking the ocean.
Feel the wind? If you listen real hard, you can hear the whales.
Their arms extended. Back in the Subaru, then a hike after dark.
This is my favorite part of the park.
His cane strikes a log and he steps over it. The woman trips over the log, then reaches her hand to the old man's shoulder. They hike together.
Just listen. Hear that?
A white owl.
Our Subaru Outback lets us see the world. Sometimes in ways we never imagined.
All right. All right. Take it away, George.
Thank you for inviting me. I do not know how to mute my kitty cat who just walked
That's okay.
and was meowing, but if you figure it out, let me know. So the Subaru commercial just kind of fell out of the sky. I'm not a professional actor, never done anything in the professional acting business ever before. I have been involved in documentary films here and there, but this came about because the company who was doing the ad, making the ad, they put out a casting call to all the casting agencies, and the casting call said they were looking for a blind gentleman between the ages of 55 and 75, somewhat rustic and a little bit curmudgeonly. And 5 or 6 different people gave them my name. I don't know because of which one of those attributes, I'm really not sure. And they actually called me. And so they used to, a long time ago, when people would do things like this, you'd have to, if they were going to a casting call, you'd have to go to wherever they were doing it, at a hotel, at a movie theater, some sort of auditorium or somewhere, and they would interview a whole bunch of people. Now they just do it all on FaceTime. And so they call me up on FaceTime. They sent me some things to read ahead of time. And so they call you up, they tell you to stand up, look right, look left, sit down and shut up, stand up, and so did all the things they asked and read the lines and that kind of stuff. And at the very end of the conversation, just after everybody was saying goodbye and everything, I heard some guy way back in the background noise say, "That's our guy." And I thought, oh yeah, maybe I got this job. It'd be fun. And I absolutely had no idea what kind of money something like this would pay. I mean, they asked me to do it. I assumed there was money involved, but the money was incredibly good. They pay you per day for the time that you were working at filming. So they paid me for, 3 days of my time, all the time. Plus they gave you a daily per diem, plus they paid for all your food and lodging and all those kinds of fun things. And then every time the ad shows, they go out and do buys. Every time the ad shows, and you get a little ka-ching in your bank account. So this ended up being incredibly profitable to me. It was really exciting. And made a career change about a year and a half ago now. I left Enchanted Hills and I went out and I purchased myself a big old commercial building downtown Greenville, Tennessee. And the Subaru money really gave me the ability to remodel the building. It was really exciting. So if you ever have the opportunity to do something like that, jump on it. It was a lot of fun. The people, the ad agency that designed the ad and put the ad together, they were pretty adamant about the fact that they really wanted a blind person to play, because they wrote a blind person into the part. They really wanted a blind person to play the part. So, and as we know from being blind people, that's relatively progressive thinking in the world. So that part was pretty cool. So if I back up about 60 plus years, 65 years, I was born in Saginaw, Michigan. I came out of my mother's womb with very, very bad vision. I have a hereditary eye disease, retinitis pigmentosus. I always jokingly told my mother I should have picked parents with better genes. And she says, I always wore Sears jeans. You mean I should have worn Calvin Klein's? So I was lucky. I grew up on a farm. If you can walk and talk and breathe when you're on a farm, there's always something for you to do. I worked in the barn a lot, learned how to milk cows and shovel manure, and baled hay, worked in the garden, canned beans, canned fruits, made jams, made jellies, did all those things. Started changing diapers on other cousins probably by the time I was about 7 or 8 years old. So you know that you're well accepted amongst your kin and relation and aunts and uncles when you get whooped right along with your cousins for doing something you shouldn't have done. Not that would have happened to me, but
no.
So I was really fortunate. I went to a residential school for the blind, Michigan School for the Blind. I probably didn't think that I was fortunate that at the time that it happened. I went to a regular elementary school for kindergarten and first and second grade. In my third grade year, I started at the School for the Blind, and then I went to the School for the Blind through my 11th grade year. And then I transferred to the local high school in our hometown, Traverse City High School, and graduated from there. But I went to the School for the Blind when they were actually probably at the pinnacle of their most effectiveness. The school, had a lot of blind teachers. It really believed in blind people. It's funny, we think about all the things we do nowadays to get textbooks and books made into Braille and books put on tape and those kinds of things. At the School for the Blind, that stuff already existed. I mean, every book that we used in every class was available either in large print or Braille or audio. I mean, every single one of them. I mean, all the tests were given. If you were a Braille reader, all the tests were given in Braille. If you were a large print reader, you got it all in large type. I mean, that was the normal everyday thing. There was no special going out to the resource room trying to figure out how to make that happen. The thing that the School for the Blind taught me too was that there are no lines drawn by blindness. It's an equal opportunity disease. So I had a little bit of everybody at the School for the Blind. So it was a relatively small population, but there was every ethnicity there. So you learned how to get along with everybody. So that was one of the things that was probably a hidden benefit of going there, was the fact that we had a real diverse group of people and had to learn to get along with a real diverse group of people. When you have just a brother and a sister that you have to deal with or something, it's pretty easy. But when you live and work with, have to work with 200 people, other people at the School for Blind students every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you learn to become a little more tolerant of the world, and you learn to have a lot of, respect for everybody's rights and privileges and those kinds of things. So went there, took all the vocational classes that they had. I was not a big academia person. I would much rather spend my time in the wood shop or the metal shop or the small engine shop. And I took every single one of those classes that the school offered. When I went to Traverse City High School my senior year, I wanted to take the auto shop class, and the guy was a little bit skeptical. And at the end of the first week, I was the auto shop teacher's assistant because I'd had so much experience with it. And I'd already been working. I worked the whole summer at a Volkswagen dealership in the engine shop, rebuilding engines and everything between my junior and senior year. I was a active sports person. I wrestled all the way through high school, got involved with cross-country skiing, bicycling, backpacking, canoeing, and all of those things for a good portion of my life. Later in my life, I got involved in competitive horseback riding, endurance rides, broke and raised and trained horses for about 10 years of my life. I guess it was
George,
even
talk
a little
about, tell them the story about your cross-country skiing and also your canoe competition.
Okay. I took a little cross-country ski trip, started in the Kola Peninsula in Russia and skied all the way across Norway, Finland, and Sweden. A little over 500 miles, probably over half the trip was north of the Arctic Circle. Now, the warmest day we had was 32 degrees. The coldest day we had was 57 below zero. And then the year before that, I had been involved with I was on the U.S. Paralympic cross-country ski team and competed for the U.S. in Geilo, Norway, and way back in the dark ages of 1980. Did some. She was asking about the canoe trip. I went to a friend of mine and I signed up to compete in the local canoe race they had every year in the town that I lived in, and I got there to the canoe race and. This was before the age of cell phones or anything, and my partner didn't show up. And there was another lady there at the canoe race who was there, and she was a competitive canoe racer from Sweden, and her partner didn't show up. So we're standing there, 5 minutes before the race start. We both have numbers. I had a canoe and everything there, and she was standing there with her paddle. And she says, "Well, do you want a partner?" And I said, "Well, yeah, let's go do that." So we, the gun goes off. We're, paddling away, and all of a sudden she's getting a little angry with me. She says, "The buoy, it's further to the right, further to the right. Can't you see the buoy?" And I go, "No, I can't see the buoy." She had no idea that I was blind. We'd known each other for less than 5 minutes before the gun went off, and I just never had time to get to that. We were talking more about canoe paddling strategies and who was going to captain and all those kinds of things. And I'd already told her she had to be the navigator, but she just wasn't understanding that until we got to where the first buoy was. And then after that, it was just fine. There was one portage. You had to portage over a dam, and we get there and they run the canoe up on shore, and she says, "What do we do now?" And I says, "We carry the canoe." She says, "Okay." So we flip the canoe up above her heads. We go, and she was in the front. So she says, "Well, how do you know where to go?" And I said, "I'm just going to follow the canoe." Because we're both holding on to the same canoe. I'm going to go wherever it went. So we went running down through this area, and I said to her, "Now when you go around this next corner, there's a bunch of stairs." And she goes, "What?" And I said, "Clear enough, you turn the corner and there's a whole big flight of stairs." We sort of throwing the canoe back, and she goes, "How do you know there's stairs?" And I says, "I've been through here 100 times, I knew the route." So, but we took third place. It was really great. We'd never paddled before ever, and took third place in the race. It was pretty fun. Did a lot of bicycling. I never have bicycled all the way across the country. I've bicycled from Missoula, Montana, all the way back to Michigan. Then I've also bicycled all the way around Lake Superior, which is about 1,500 miles. And so spent a lot of time on the back of a tandem as a stoker. My career when I came out of high school, I was a Volkswagen mechanic. I decided I didn't like getting dirty and grubby and greasy, and I was looking for something different to do. And so I started building some lawn furniture, me and a buddy of mine, out of the basement of his house, and putting them out in the front yard for sale. And a guy came along and bought 2 chairs one day, and then 2 weeks later he came back and he bought 100 chairs, and I was in the woodworking business. It was just pure dumb luck. I outgrew my buddy's basement instantaneously. Went looking for a place to put my shop in the basement of a commercial office building in downtown Traverse City. And my deal with the guy who owned the office building was I couldn't make any noise during the day because it was all offices above the basement. So one of them being the IRS office, you know, you don't want to make them mad. So my deal for my rent for the building was that I became the head janitor for the building. Every night I vacuumed all the halls, cleaned all the bathrooms, washed all the doors, entry doors down, cleaned all the windows, shoveled all the snow in the wintertime. Was there for about 2 years. Managed to put enough money away in the bank in those 2 years to buy an old beat up decrepit building on the south end of town. It needed a new roof and windows and just incidental little things. And so I re-roofed the building with myself and 3 friends, and moved the machinery in and got up and working, and was doing incredibly well. Went from, in the case of about 8 years, went from a single man operation to having 10 full-time employees, doing a lot of commercial work, bar and restaurant fixtures, bank teller lines, storefronts on buildings. Did a huge restoration job, was one of the main contractors to restore the old county courthouse in our town, and did all of the millwork, all the new millwork to match the old millwork for the restoration project. In late 1982, the whole world came crashing down. The interest rates went to 20%. The oil embargo came along at the same time. And I had just built on an addition on my shop for a new finishing room, and couldn't make the payments at the bank, and lost everything I had. Started over from absolute zero. Moved from northern Michigan to Hickory, North Carolina with all my possessions, and I rode on the Greyhound bus. So that tells me how much stuff I had left in my world. Went back to college at Catawba Valley College to get a degree in furniture production management. There's an interesting story there. I had searched through the country looking for different places that had furniture programs, and found 2 or 3 different ones. And the one in North Carolina was the one that appealed to me the most. Plus, it was right dead center of the middle of the furniture industry in the United States. So I sent them my resume. I sent them my portfolio. They accepted me. They took my money. And I show up for the first day of classes and go into the guidance counselor's office and sit down, and our conversation had been in process for less than 3 minutes. And he says, "Are you blind?" And I said, "Yep, I am." He goes, "Do you understand what this program is about, what we do?" And I said, "That's why I'm here." He goes, "We run big industrial woodworking machinery, big stuff, really dangerous stuff." And I said to the gentleman, I said, "I noticed when we shook hands," I says, "I noticed you only had a thumb and 1 finger on your right hand." I says, "How did that happen?" He says, "Well, in a woodworking accident." And I immediately said to him, I says, "Are you blind?" And he goes, "No, I'm not blind." I says, "Well, so blindness doesn't have anything to do with you cutting your fingers off." And he didn't have much to say about that. And then my next line to him was that I'm only looking for the same opportunity to cut my fingers off as you had. And that was pretty much the end of the conversation about me and my blindness and running the machinery and everything. And I already knew that, they took federal funding. There was no way that they could really keep me from taking their programs. They could make it really, really difficult for me, but they could never keep me from doing it. I had to take this is a funny story about later on, I had to take a plant engineering class where you had to design a full, a whole woodworking factory, to manufacture a product. So they would assign you the product, then you had to engineer the factory, put all the machines in it, design all the dust collection and air system and product flow and all those kinds of things. So on the one wall of the lab, there was a 16-foot long by 4-foot tall bulletin board. So I covered that whole bulletin board with raised line graph paper and used push pins and string and yarn and cut out little replicas of the machinery and that I wanted to put on out of cardboard that I wanted to put where on in my furniture plant and layout and design. And we're into the term, probably about 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks, about halfway in, and all of a sudden the professor of the class says to the class, he says, "Well, guys, we seem to have a big problem here." And I'm wondering, oh, geez, now what's the problem? And he goes, "It seems like everybody's design in the class is looking an awful lot like the one on the wall." Because it was incredibly easy. People could just, it was huge, people could just glance up from their drafting tables and look at the design that I was putting on the wall. And nowadays that would all be done, all that today is all done on computers, and so it would have actually made it harder for me today to do those kinds of things, because then how do you do the computer program? I would have still been stuck with trying to figure out how to do it, using old time methods. So I started my shop out in Traverse City, Michigan in the early 1970s. Ran it for about 10 years. After I went broke, I went to North Carolina, went back to college. When I was finishing up with at the college, some people hired me to design and build a kitchen cabinet manufacturing plant, a small one. And I took on the task. I told the people it was going to take probably around, a year and a half, 18 months, somewhere in there to get it up and running. So I bought all the machinery, hired all the people, laid out the whole plant, got it up and running, was putting production out the door. And the man who owned the furniture, the operation who I was working for, we sat down to have our monthly meeting. And we had just landed a really nice contract with a condo developer to do all the kitchens in a new condo development. And I said, well, okay, I've proven what I can do. I want more money. And the Mr. Baxter, who is the head guy, had all the money invested in it. He says, well, I'm not going to give you any more money yet. And I said, well, I've been here long enough. I said, I've been here a year and a half. I did everything I was going to do. You can see that I am competent in what I do. I says, I've done absolutely everything I said I was going to do from day one that we said we were going to do. I've accomplished. I said it was going to take about 18 months. It's taken me 19 months to do it. I says, but a month of that was tied up with the fact that one of the pieces of machinery we bought got hung up in customs for about 60 days. For some reason, they did not want to release this piece of machinery that we bought from Sweden. So we got pushed back it ended up pushing me back, I thought, about a month. So, but he was pretty stubborn about it. He was not going to give me more money. And I'm more stubborn than he was, because I picked up my notes off the desk and stood up, and he said, where are you going? The meeting's not over. And I said, I'm done. He goes, what do you mean you're done? I said, yeah, I'm done. I'm not, and you won't pay me more money. I want more money. I'll go back to work for myself. And so I walked out the door and went on my merry way. Was looking around for something to do, found a friend of mine who made router bits and tooling for the woodworking industry. He was looking for a outside salesperson to sell his product. I went to work for him. I stumbled into, here again, just an incredibly lucky thing. I found him a contract that would take up all of his production. And so he came to me one day and he says, well, I really don't have a job for you anymore. He says, because I can't make any more than what you've already sold. He says, my contract, he says, I have contracts for the next 2 years. And he says, you're more than welcome to keep your office. He says, but I really don't have anything for you. He says, you should just move on. And so, okay. So he gave me my office, gave me the office that I was using to do whatever I wanted to do. So I had an office to work out of and didn't know what I was going to do exactly. At about the same time, my mom happened to wander through town, and I had my dad's flag from when he passed away. He had been in World War II, and when you get a military funeral, they present the widow or the survivors or whatever with a flag that they drape over the casket when they do the funeral ceremony. So my dad died back when I was 13 years old. So I was cleaning up some stuff at my house, and my mom had stopped, and my dad's flag was laying on the coffee table in the middle of the living room. And as moms can sometimes do to their children, humble them into doing things, she said to me, she says, I don't understand. You've been in the woodworking business for your whole life. And she goes, you've never built a nice box to put that flag in. And I says, oh, you're right, Mom. I've never done that. So I had a little free time. So the next morning I got up really, really early, which I have a tendency to do, probably 4 o'clock in the morning. That's leftovers from milking cows. And went out in the garage and found some cherry lumber, and made a really nice little box to put my dad's internment flag in, and presented it to my mom the next day. And she said, "Oh, you're such a good son. I'm so proud of you." However moms say whatever they're gonna do to you. And so I the very, very next day after Mom left, a neighbor stops in with his brother or brother-in-law, one or the other, and we're sitting there talking, and the guy says to me, he says, is that a flag box on your coffee table? And I said, yeah. He says, where did you get that? And I said, well, I made that. He goes, well, it's really strange. My brother-in-law or brother, whichever it was, owns a funeral home just down, in the next town down the road. He says, just last week he asked me where I could buy or get someone to make boxes to put veterans internment flags in. He says, we should go show it to him. And I says, when? He goes, well, what are you doing right now? And I said, nothing. So we went out and jumped in his truck and went and saw him and walked in the door. Hadn't even hardly sat down. And the guy says, you making those? And I said, yeah. And he goes, I want 6 of them. I says, when? He goes, now. And so I turned right around, went home and got out some more lumber, produced some boxes for him, and then produced some boxes to do some photography with, take some pictures, and then did a little bit of test marketing to see how it was going to market. Found that they were incredibly easy to sell. One of the sad things about the whole thing was that the only way that people bought this product is if someone died. And if you went and looked at the statistics from the Veterans Administration, it was easy to see in the next, 5 to 10 years, there was going to be about 3 million veterans who were going to pass away. And so the market for the product was excellent. And so I started marketing the product, was doing pretty well. I worked it up to a place where I just landed a contract with the federal government with the Army to produce some flag cases for them. I was negotiating another contract with the Air Force to produce flag cases for them, and came to the conclusion that I had nowhere near enough money to be able to manufacture, what I was selling. Cash flow is king. If you have cash, you can do anything. So I was looking for an investor. I found a local gentleman in town who had the resources to be an investor. And we were down to the very, very last meeting, I thought, with him. And we sit down for the last negotiation, or what I think is the last negotiation. And he goes, well, I've decided I don't want to invest in your company. I just spent a huge amount of time putting this whole deal together. And he says, but I'll buy it from you. How much you want for it? And I just threw some stupid number out on the table off the top of my head. He says, well, I'll think about it. So the next morning he calls me up. He says, okay, I'll buy your company. Never counter offered, nothing. Just I'll buy your company. So I owned my little flag case company for 3 years and 3 days. When I sold it to him, I had 2,500 accounts coast to coast. Several years after I sold the company to him, he I had a little write-up in the local newspaper, and they were kind enough to mention my name. And he sent it to me, and it was talking about them selling their millionth flag box. So I was pretty proud of myself to have manufactured, designed, and marketed something that sold over 1 million units. I still think that's cool to this very day. So I sold my flag case company, was hanging around in Hickory, North Carolina. My girlfriend at the time was in the baking business, and I built her a couple bakeries. And her and I had a difference of opinion, and I moved back to Michigan and started up a kitchen cabinet company, designing kitchens and making and manufacturing countertops for kitchens. That did really, really well. I did well enough that I managed to get my picture of one of my designs on the front of Furniture, the Kitchen Design and Manufacturing magazine. I sent pictures of a kitchen that we had done into their little design competition, and I didn't win first place, but I got my picture on the front cover, which made me happy. And the guy who won first place didn't get his picture on the front cover, and he was mad. He was a sore winner, I tell you. And, so the economy in the state of Michigan started going way downhill again back, and this is their right around 2003, 2004. I saw the writing on the wall this time, and I bailed early. I just closed down my shop and started looking for something to do. Went to work for Opportunities Unlimited for the Blind, and ran a camp for blind kids in Michigan for about 5 years, similar to what EHC runs there in California. And by 2009, 2010, the economy had gotten so bad in the state of Michigan, there was just no money left to do anything. So we closed down the camp, and I got recruited by Blind Incorporated, which is a private rehabilitation center in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to come be their industrial arts teacher. Went there, worked there for them about 2 years, I guess. And the management and I, because George is pretty pig-headed, didn't get along real well, so I quit. And I had already set up a small woodworking shop, my own, in Minneapolis. Was doing some architectural millwork restoration for people who were renovating old houses who wanted a piece of millwork to match something that was on the house from when it was built back in the 1800s and early 1900s. Was doing okay with that, and then the people at Enchanted Hills, Tony Fletcher, he sends me a letter one day, and he says, we want to start an art program at Enchanted Hills Camp with the Blind. We want to restore this old grape crushing barn into art studios and those kinds of things. And he says, are you interested? And I said, well, wave some money in front of me. So he did. And I went out and started up the program at Enchanted Hills. And that all did really fine and great until the fire came along and burned down, a third of the camp. And my job went from, doing what I love to do, which was the teaching and the running of the art programs and working on the art building and that, to becoming the construction manager for the rebuilding process for redoing the camp. And my job went from my nice cushy 35 to 40 hours a week to 70 hours a week. And it boils down to money and time, and they didn't want to give me any more money, so I didn't want to give them any more time. So them and I went separate directions. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I didn't think I was ready to die quite yet. So I started looking around for a place to move. My dream when I was 19 years old was to own a building that I could have my residence in, have an art gallery in, / furniture gallery, and my wood shop all in the same building. So I started looking around the country for different places, and I had lived in North Carolina lived in North Carolina for those 15 years.
Alexa off.
So I liked the area. So I started looking around in North Carolina and Tennessee and Kentucky and Virginia, and just started looking at all the little towns until I found a building that met my criteria, and bought an old beat up building right downtown in this little town of Greenville, Tennessee. And it had a few problems. Needed a new roof, needed new windows, didn't have any electrical service, the plumbing was shot. But besides that, it's a really nice building. And I've spent the last year and a half fixing all those things up. I have a new roof now, new plumbing, new electrical service, new heat and air conditioning in the building. Have restored the whole front of the building and rebuilt the storefront on it. It's starting to look like it belongs here. So that has occupied my last year and a half. I've done a few other things I missed talking about yesterday. I was involved in a documentary film process it's called Mary's Journey. It's a documentary film about a lady who dies at age 24 of sarcoma cancer. And she was from Michigan. There was this really cool little book that was written back in the 1940s, early 50s, called Paddle to the Sea. And it was about a young American Indian boy who carves a little canoe with a little Indian in it, and he puts it on the shore of Lake Superior in the springtime. And the book documents the journey of the little boat from Lake Superior all the way out to the Atlantic Ocean. And on the bottom of the boat, the young boy writes on it, "My name is Paddle. I'm trying to get to the sea. If you find me along the way, please put me back on my journey." And so Mary Kent, who figured out that she was dying from cancer, one of her dreams on her bucket list was to, at some point in time, make that same journey that Paddle did from Lake Superior all the way out to the Atlantic Ocean. When she figured out that she was not going to be able to make that journey, she asked my friend Keith Famey if he could put her ashes in a boat and have it make the journey. And he goes, I don't know how to do that. And she says, well, I want to make the same journey that Paddle made. So he calls me up and says, can you build me a boat that will carry internment ashes from Lake Michigan out to the Atlantic Ocean? I said, well, sure I can. So I went and met with Mary Kent before she passed away, and sat down with her at the Keith's library table, and I had a big chunk of styrofoam, and I carved her a model of the boat the way she wanted it to look, and went back to my shop. And sadly, 2 weeks before I finished the boat, Mary had passed away. But Keith went on and made the video, the documentary film, and it's a non-linear film, but it documents the last 10 or 11 months of Mary Kent's life. And then it keeps going back and forth between what is happening with her and her struggle to the boat that I made, making its journey from Lake Michigan out to the Atlantic Ocean. So that was a lot of fun, being involved. But the story is sad, but the story is as much about Mary Kent and her struggle as it is with many people's struggle with cancer, and the interaction between the people and the boat as it makes its journey is just absolutely incredible. There's all these things that are just appear to be purely coincidental between people seeing the boat and then them talking about their friends who have had struggles with cancer and different things. It was very touching. I liked doing that project. My biggest and newest and most fantastic project that I'm just getting started into, and would have already started if it hadn't been for this COVID-19 mess. One of my dreams about 10 years ago or so was to build a reproduction of one of Helen Keller's desk. And so I've been slowly but surely putting this project together. We had it all ready to have the big blast-off party for it and everything at the American Foundation for the Blind Conference in May. first week of April this year, and then the whole thing fell apart and they canceled their conference. So we never got it up and off the ground at this point in time, but we're still going to do that through my shop here in Greenville. We're going to build 100 replicas of Helen Keller's desk, and we're going to sell them. We're going to take the proceeds to start a scholarship program through American Foundation for the Blind / Marion Printing House for the Blind that will help give money to people who want to take non-traditional things to earn a living. People who want to become woodworkers, people who want to become potters, people who want to become artists, people who want to become sculptors, weavers, bee raisers, all the things that rehab services are quite unwilling to fund. That's my goal with it. So that's me in a nutshell, in as fast as I could tell you a 60-year-old story in a half hour.
Wow.
Well, that's it's a wonderful story, and I think for a lot of people of you that are new at vision loss, hopefully it made you aware of the possibilities, and that if you have a passion for something, it is possible. So what I'd like to do now is open it up to questions, but please say your name first, and then I will call on you if you have a question. Anybody have a question for George?
Steven,
Aiden, come on.
I'm just wondering I'm a newly blind person. I'm kind of used to be an artist before my blindness. Just kind of wondering, for instance, how do you figure out how you're dimensioning or cutting or creating a project such as a desk?
Well, measuring is very simple. There is a ruler out on the market called a click rule, which I use religiously. It's a tactile ruler. It's incredibly accurate. It's very simple to use. They sell them at the store in San Francisco at the Lighthouse. They're called click rules. They're really easy to use. Have you ever looked for other blind artists that are out there in the world? There's a deaf blind artist out of New York City who's a good friend of mine. Matter of fact, when I worked in Minneapolis, she became a student of mine. Her name is Emily Gassio. She has the most listened to program on Audio Lab that they've ever done about her story of her life. Her life is kind of interesting. She decided when she was 13 or 14 years old, she wanted to be an artist. She decided she wanted to go to the Cooper Union, which is the last totally free art school that's left in the United States. It's in New York City. If they decide you're good enough to go to school there, you get to go to school there. She got to go to school there. She had a small hearing problem as a younger adult, and when she was in her junior year at the Cooper Union, she was sitting on her bicycle on a corner, and a truck came around the corner and knocked her off. She landed on her head, lost all her vision, and lost all of her hearing. She now has a cochlear implant, and she is just now getting her doctoral degree in art of some sort. But she is a sculptor, and she's had some pretty successful shows around the country and around the world. I did a show with her in in San Francisco, at an art gallery there once upon a time, and she's done shows in London, shows in New York City, shows in Chicago. She's a pretty amazing artist. She's 26, 27 years old. Absolutely refuses to take no for an answer. And she will tell you the same thing that I say about it, is that art and your ability to design and your ability to envision is not in your eyeballs, it's in your brain. You just have to find a way to get those, processes out through your fingers now instead of out through your eyes.
Right.
Yesterday, George, there was a actually my client who asked me a question after, and she was too shy to ask it during the seminar. And this kind of fits in with his question. She said, well, how can you produce something if you can't see it? And so, you know, we had a conversation about how we see with our hands and how that doesn't really miss anything, because our brains and our hands are well connected, and you can get the same mental picture in your head through your hands that you can through your eyes from an object, by touching an object.
You know, some of the really famous sculptures, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, both of them, they would go to the butcher shops, and they would strip the hides back off of animals and run their hands up and down the muscular structure of the animals, and they even say that they did it at mortuaries and did it to people as well, because they wanted, when you touched their sculptures and when you ran your hands up and down the arms and legs of their sculptures, they wanted you to be able to feel the muscle structure underneath in the marble, you know, in the granite or whatever or in the bronze or whatever they were doing. And I have had the opportunity in my life to look at several of these sculptures and be able to touch them and everything. And it is so very true. There is a huge sculpture of a horse in Grand Rapids, Michigan at the Meyer Gardens Sculpture Park, and having raised horses and everything, you walk up to this bronze statue of this horse and you run your hands down the legs of this horse, and it is exactly like you're feeling the horse. The muscles underneath the skin, or you can feel them. I mean, it's incredible, and that's all non-visual. I mean, that is purely 100% tactile.
You know, to that end, it's interesting example that you gave. When I was taking the horse husbandry program at Sierra College, we went out to do confirmation, and so we went out to the instructor's ranch, and she brought out some horses, and we were supposed to find their confirmation faults. And most of the students would stand there and just look, and they would miss a lot. And of course, I was running my hands over the horse, and I would discover the things that they were not seeing. Any other questions?
It has been my observation in life that almost all things that feel beautiful, inviting, sensual in your hands are also the same way to the people's eye.
Yes. Any other questions?
It's me, Stephen, again. I just have a bunch of technical questions.
Go for it.
I mean, it's a lot, but maybe like for one, like if say you're creating a desk, how do you keep it even on the tops and not, if you put a marble on it, it doesn't roll up like it's not supposed to?
You build it square and level.
Talk about the accessible tools, George.
That's what I meant, the tools.
I have so few tools that are quote unquote blind people tools. I mean, just so few. I use a level lots of times in my shop that is the same level that the Romans used to use, which is just a piece of, angle iron. Now, the one I have nowadays is a piece of angle iron that has a foot on one end, so it'll sit flat up on its corner, and it has a large ball bearing in it, and you set that on any surface, and you can see which way things roll, which way the marble rolls in the frame. That technology is about 4,000 years old, I think.
But it works.
And it works today just as good as it worked back then. You are now blessed with modern technology, and in your iPhone, there is an incredible level in your iPhone.
Yes, there is.
I mean, it works perfect. I mean, I was leveling concrete forms with mine this summer, And people laughed at me when I pulled out my phone and laid it on the concrete for him. They said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm seeing if it's level." And the guy goes, "What?" And I said, "Yeah, there's no level in here." And he goes, "You're shitting me." I mean, he says,
Okay.
and I said, he goes, I said, "See, there is." And he pulls his phone out and starts looking. He says, "Oh my God, there is a level in here." And so, there are some pretty cool things out. There's some audio output tape measures. Tape King, I think, is the one that's out there right now. That's probably the best one. And they're pretty good. I mean, they will get you close. They're not as good a technology as the click rule is.
It's in the phone. It's serious to pull out my level.
Hello.
Yeah, it's in your phone. It's under. It used to be in with the compass. Now I think it's under. What's it called? It's where the measurements and everything is. There's also a measuring device in there. I haven't fussed with it too much. My brother says it works pretty good. My brother's also blind, and he says it works pretty good. But I've never fussed with. You have to put it at one. You put it at one point. You double tap on the screen. You slide it to the next point, and it'll tell you what the distance is in between. But I've never fussed with it. There's a company that makes a audio output. It's made for the rest of the sighted world, but it reads out to your iPhone. There's vernier calipers that read out to your iPhones. There's micrometers that read right out to your iPhone. Protractors that read right out to your iPhone. I mean, so there's some really cool stuff out there that's never existed before that you just had to figure out how to work around.
My problem is figuring out how to locate it or figure out if they even exist.
Yeah. There is a internet group called WW4B, which is Woodworkers for the Blind. And those guys on that, there's probably a couple hundred people from around the world that belong to that. And if you have any question about how to do any kind of measuring or those kinds of things, or what tools are out there to do, what kind of tools are out there for blind people to use, if you put a question up on that website, on that internet page, I guarantee you'll get an answer back, because there's some really sharp guys on that website.
Numeral 4B?
Yeah, WW and then the number 4B.
Okay.
WW4B. Yep. There's some smart guys on there.
Awesome. Thank you.
As of this fall, I'm going to start teaching out of my facility. So if you're interested in going somewhere and taking classes in what you want to do, I don't claim to be any kind of world-class artist. I am a technical resource. You tell me what you want to do, I'll teach you how to build it. I can't pull your sculpture out of your brain, though.
I'm a technical artist, so.
And just so you all know, NFB is a really good resource for specialty interests. So they have a lot of divisions that address specific interests. For example, many years ago, I started the agricultural and equestrian division. There's school teachers division. There's diabetics division. There's blind lawyers division. There's art division. So it's a good resource for connecting with people that are into what you're into.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't talk about it much, but I've done 2 international art shows now, which is, in my opinion, is just incredibly cool. I mean, people that picked me, the first one that I was in was at the Detroit Museum of Contemporary Art. I was one of 20 artists that were picked to have a show that was up there for 6 months, I guess. But that was really kind of cool, because the people who put this show together, they went around to different artists around the country who were very well known, and they said, go out in your community and find some artists that you think are worthy of being in this show. So the guy that chose me, his name is Alex Soth. He's a world famous photographer. And but he sent his assistant out into the community to look for artists that they thought, jointly should be in this show. And his whole thing to her was, he says, bring me back samples and photos of their work, but I don't want to know who they are. I don't want to know anything about them. I just want to look at their work. So he chose me out of a group of, a couple hundred artists in Minneapolis that they looked at, purely based on my work. He didn't have a clue who I was. He did not know I was blind. He knew nothing about me. He picked it just purely on what he saw in the photos and things that his assistant brought back to him. And that was my first indication to me that I had good tangible evidence of that I was not necessarily a good artist because people felt sorry for me because I was blind, that I was a good artist because people looked at my work and thought it was worthy. And since then I did another show in LA at the Pacific Design Center in LA, which is the biggest design center in the world. Did a big show there. It was the best show I've ever done as far as quantity of work that I sold. I've done some other shows, done the show in Milwaukee, done a show in Chicago, just recently did a show up in Washington, D.C., Baltimore area up there. All those things have come crashing to a halt, so I don't know what's going to happen next. But one of my goals in my gallery here that I'm developing in my building here is to bring in different artists from around the world. I'm calling my gallery a haptic gallery, and that's the discovery of things with your hands. So I will probably do some photography shows and some paintings and those kinds of things. But I'm going to concentrate on sculpture and furniture and a lot of furniture. A lot of sculpture and a lot of furniture is what my gallery is going to concentrate on.
Cool.
Very good. Any other questions? That's as quiet as it's been the whole time. Well, thank you so much, George, for doing this twice. I really appreciate it. I think it gave a lot of insight to some folks that are new at all this.
You have things at your fingertips today that that you can access that were non-existent, when I started off doing what I was doing in the world. If you wanted to know something from somebody, you either had to pick up a phone and call them or write them a letter and put a stamp on the envelope and put it in the mailbox. If you wanted technical information, the source for technical information, was trade journals and manuals and books and everything. Nowadays, you can look anything up on the internet. You can find a YouTube video to do darn near anything you want to do in the world, or see how someone else thinks that it should be done, which may give you ideas of your own. The opportunities to do whatever you want to do are driven by you. You shouldn't let people tell you what to do who don't have to live off the fruits of your labor. I've always thought that. And the best thing you can do for yourself if you want to try to do something is learn how to be the best you can be at it. I listened to an Eric Clapton interview one time, and someone asked him, how he became such an amazing guitar player. And he says, I practiced 16 hours a day for 3 years straight before I thought I was worthy to go out and look for a job working in a band. And that's the kind of dedication it takes. I am good at what I do for a living because I've been doing it for 45 plus years. I've dedicated my life to what I love and what I want to do. I've been very unwilling to take no for an answer. I've been very pig-headed my whole life and done what I wanted to do. I don't suffer fools well. I've been fired from every good job I've ever had in my whole life, or quit, or a combination of the two, that they were happy to see me go and I wanted to leave. So you have to decide, what's important to you. Do you want to work for the man? Do you want to work for yourself? If you want to work for yourself, you better understand you're going to work harder, you're going to work longer, and for less money than you would have if you worked for somebody else. If you work for somebody else, you get up in the morning, you don't feel real ambitious. You go to work, you still get a paycheck. If you work for yourself and you don't feel very ambitious in the morning, you don't work very hard, you don't have any money at the end of the day. So you have to become motivated if you want to do things for yourselves.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, George, and let us know how your projects and your upcoming classes are.
Okay, my website is gmwurtzel.com, and then I have a Facebook page as well that's just George Wurtzel, and there's another Facebook page out there that is George the Subaru guy that has all the photos of all the restoration of my building. I figured they financed it; they ought to be able to look at it. So
there you go,
George.
And that'll be some good practice for folks in their computer classes.
There you go.
George, can I ask a
Yes.
question? This is Steve. George, your last name Wurtzel, W-E-R?
Wurtzel. And feel free to contact me. I'm easy to find. If you Google me, I come up at the top of the page.
Awesome. That makes it easy.
Yeah.
I have a statement.
Appreciate your story. Thank you.
Can I make a statement here?
Sure.
Yeah. George?
Yes, sir.
You are a incredible human being.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well, no, really. I listened to your story, and you just showed me there's no excuses, and the blindness is not really a handicap. It's just we just have that little infraction, but we can move on with our life. But I want to thank you for sharing your story, and I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I strongly believe if you can't go over it, go under it. If you can't go under it, go around it. And if that doesn't work, blow it up.
There you go. I like it.